Biden officially signed a $1 trillion infrastructure bill to help with our roads, bridges, and trains, just to name a few. Monumental boom or bust? Today I'm going to discuss this and how it affects you. This is Chicago's crappy infrastructure is super expensive to fix. Hi, I'm AD, a local realtor. You can see my information right up here. And let's start with what exactly is the infrastructure plan. So I did a little research, and the plan here, the $1 trillion infrastructure plan that President Joe Biden signed into law that has money for roads, bridges, ports, rail, transit, safe water, power grid, broadband internet. That's a mouthful, right? And then of course it goes on to say that the White House, this is the White House's projection, is with the investments on average, there'll be about 2 million jobs per year over the coming decade. Let's further break that down and kind of go a couple of the sectors, right? So roads and bridges, 110 billion to repair the nation's aging highways, bridges, and roads. And I found this really telling here. 173,000 miles, 280 kilometers, 45,000 bridges are in poor condition. And this 40 billion is the largest single dedicated investment since the start of the national highway system. I don't know when the year was. Of course, this is again, according to the Biden administration, but that is significant. 39 billion to public transit. So public transit, 39 billion, improve, of course, accessibility, which is very important, low admission here, buses. And the Transportation Department estimates that the current repair backlog is more than 24,000 buses, 5,000 rail cars, 200 stations, and thousands of miles of track power systems. Rail and freight, super important, particularly in Chicago. I mean, of course, we're the heartbeat as far as rail systems. And the amount of allotted funds here, 66 billion. I mean, there's a huge Amtrak, which has a major presence here in Chicago. Maintenance backlog, 66 billion. It was less than the 80 billion that Biden wanted, but this is really key here. If you see this last sentence, it'd be the largest federal investment in passenger rail service since Amtrak was founded 50 years ago. Wow. On the electric front, the bill would spend 7.5 billion for electric vehicles charging stations, which the administration said is critical to accelerating the use of electric vehicles to curb climate change. Now, of course, if they would help with the cars, the cost of the cars, I can't afford a Tesla, I don't know about you, but that's a whole other story. So that is, of course, with the ultimate goal of reducing reliance on school buses that run on diesel fuel. So there are 4 more other points. I want to kind of have them all in one. I would be on this video forever, right? So as you can see in here, internet access, modernizing the electric grid, airports, of course, Chicago with, and I believe is a second as far as traffic to Atlanta in O'Hare, and of course we have Midway, and water and wastewater, and I'll discuss that in a second. But as you can see, that is a lot of projects for the 1 trillion. But of course, what does that impact to Chicago? So Chicago, in my research here, 17 billion is what's projected to be allocated to Chicago. Now, they just in 2019 approved 45 billion. So, I mean, you see the title of my video, it is super expensive. How they're gonna pay for that? However, they said they have the money, but at least from this Biden infrastructure bill, there'll be 17 billion coming in there, focusing primarily on the Eisenhower expressway, expansion of the Red Line, which is very critical. The underserved south side communities will be served by that transit. Transit is very important to people. And I mentioned that water, I mean, we have some really old pipes here, and so that of course needs money. So that's kind of the Chicago impact. Will it will any of the rail systems, which is really desperate? There was a 2017 article, and actually Amazon had a 2015 study, just basically how much of a bottleneck is going on in Chicago. There's 1 trillion, folks. Speaking of 1 trillion, folks, there's 1 trillion of goods and services traveling through Chicago. That is amazing, right? It's the hub, it's the heartbeat as far as rail service, and there's just a bottleneck. Nothing has been updated. And the fear here is we're going to lose that money. And as a Chicagoan, that should be very important to you, right? Because then ultimately, how they're going to get money and revenues, the city has to tax us. So we're hoping that some of that money will be allocated. Now, 17 billion is what I know right now. Things are, even though it's signed, things can be fluid as far as numbers, and there's going to be politics involved, of course. So our hope here is whoever is in leadership, Pritzker, Lightfoot, gets us more money, and some of that money is devoted to rail. Before we go on any longer, what about you? What do you feel overall about the infrastructure bill? Do you like it, yay or nay? Now, as far as two primary concerns kind of coming out of this infrastructure bill, things that we're already actually going through right now, inflation, and then of course interest rates. With inflation, you know, we are already at, in the latest numbers of the CPI was 6.2, the largest in over 30 years. But what the pundits are saying are that they're not going to necessarily be any long-term inflationary concerns, okay? So basically, as you can see right here, I've got an article here that from The Hill, top analysts say Biden's infrastructure social spending plans won't add to the inflationary pressure. That's the report. So that's one article. And then of course, from a specific economist, Mark Zandi, he adds here that the bills do not add to inflation pressures as the politics help to lift long-term economic growth via stronger productivity and labor force growth, and thus takes an edge off of inflation, okay? He added that the bills are paid for largely by higher taxes on multinational corporations and wealthy households. So at least from this article, the middle class won't be affected. It's, of course, you know, I don't have a crystal ball, but that's what this particular expert economist says regarding inflation. Another article from CNBC, okay, again, I guess traditionally leaning a little bit left. However, it is the article that I was able to come up with here. It says it here, ignore the hysterical people, inflation is not here to stay. And there's a couple of key points here I wanted to kind of highlight and blur the background is US CPI, as I mentioned this stat just a little earlier. US CPI inflation came in at an annual 6.2% in October. That is the steepest climb in more than 30 years. Energy, shelter, housing, and vehicle costs led the gains, which more than wiped out the wage increases that workers have received. So you may have seen, and a lot of people have gotten those increases, maybe gotten bonuses, but of course, because of where we're at, inflation in the short term here, that has been wiped. So just like with housing, right, supply and demand, inflation kind of has that supply and demand component, what the experts say. So as you've seen here, we all seen with the timber costs, supply chain, you've seen you've probably seen on the news in the LA, Long Beach, New Jersey ports, there's miles and miles, just a bottleneck there of ships just waiting to unload their inventory. So that should ease of what the experts are saying and cause that inflation, which was at 6.2%, to kind of come down. But now what about that second concern I mentioned, interest rates, right? Interest rates are very, very, particularly as now we kind of circle back to real estate, my bread and butter. Interest rates is very for first-time buyers and for some move-up buyers, right? Who will probably be able to sell their home. But then what about their new home? That interest rate is very sensitive for those two groups. And what I was able to glean here is the government is doing tapering. Tapering, of course, is they've been doing that asset buying program month over month due to recession. As we're coming out of the pandemic, post-recession, that tapering, the bond buying program that the Fed was doing, they're going to, by 15 billion each month, they're going to be start reducing that. And so that may cause, on a gradual basis, interest rates to go up. I've got a second article here. This is the main article. I want to show you a little bit of the details here. The Fed announced it will start reducing its purchasing of securities by 15 billion each month. And then experts expect this move to increase mortgage interest rates since the Fed was buying these securities at low rates, keeping mortgage rates at historic lows, given today's news, it's quite possible that rates will continue to inch up. See that stress on inch up, increasing the urgency for homeowners considering refinancing. So yeah, so my sellers out there, if you are considering refinancing, it's probably something that you want to do now. If you're buying, okay, it's gradual, it's not a spike. I'm not trying to scare tactics or anything, but this is what's happening here is you have inflation, which may stabilize home prices. It's still yet to be seen, right? But then everything gets wiped out, just like your wage increases are wiped out because interest rates are going up. So the longer you wait, ladies and gentlemen, from buying and selling, buying particularly, right? Of course, but those sellers need to find a home to buy. You're risking losing your purchasing power as those interest rates go up. Now, this is all fluid, and the Fed, looking at inflation, if it starts to reduce from that 6.2%, what the experts here are saying, this is not my opinion, folks, but the experts are saying, the Fed, it's a fluid situation. So they may ask for the rates to go up, they may stay flat. As of right now, we're at about, I produced this on November 17th. To 2021, we're just above 3%, 3.071. It was 2.98 last week, so still very, very good. So I don't know, if I were you, I wouldn't want to wait till it's 3.5, 3.6. So those are the kind of explaining inflation and interest rates. And what do you think is going to happen to home prices and interest rates as we move month over month? So this has been a really interesting. I haven't been doing a lot of these. I'm hoping to do more kind of current events. I would love to hear what you feel. Anything at all, comment below. Now what I'd like you to do is I'd like you to watch a couple of videos that are coming up on the screen. Stay on my channel. I appreciate the support. Any questions at all, please reach out, 773-490-6151. Take care.